Hello and welcome to NPS Now, your source for news and information about Norfolk Public Schools. I'm your host, Karen Tanner, and with me today is Meredith Hobson. She's the Senior Coordinator for Foreign Language and ESL. Welcome to NPS Now again.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Tell us, I mentioned the ESL, but what does ESL mean and how is it commonly referred to within our district?
Typically, the programs that support English learners are called ESL programs, English as a Second Language. However, since the latest version, ESSA, they've changed that title a little bit because what we've learned is a lot of our immigrant students, we say English as a second language, but many of our students, for them, English is not their second language. They may already be proficient in Chinese, another dialect from their country, French, and then also now they're learning English. So English may be the third or fourth language that they're learning. So we've changed the title a little bit for the students themselves. So they're English learners. Programs at large that were still usually referred to English as a second language.
How is a student identified in a district as an English learner?
Well, the way Norfolk Public Schools identify English learners is consistent with federal and state guidelines about how we find these students. We don't want to over-identify, but we also want to make sure we find all the students that are needing support in English. So typically, well, not typically, all the time, when a student enrolls, actually every enrollment packet in Norfolk Public Schools for every student, American-born and otherwise, part of that enrollment packet has a home language survey, and it asks about what languages are spoken at home, what was the first language a student learned to speak, and what their preferred language is when they speak. And those questions guide us and may indicate that a student may need to be screened for their English. So that's that first step. Every student in Norfolk Public Schools fills out this form. If parents report on that form any language other than English, again, whether it was the first language they learned to speak or it's still spoken in the house, then that form, when it's given to the SDS or the office manager, whoever is responsible for enrollees at that school building, if anything other than English is on that form, they scan our office, Darlene Waters or myself. And then also, if there's already an ESL teacher assigned to that school, they give that form to the ESL teacher as well.
How many students do we have in the ESL program?
There's 800 that are still getting service, around 800. I mean, it fluctuates between 820, 888, and 1,100 total when you include the students that were formerly ESL, and now they're just getting additional support. So anywhere between 8 and 1,100.
Is that the norm for us every year, or are we adding to that number?
Actually, interestingly enough, our numbers have remained kind of static. When I look back, I've only been here 2 years. I've only been able to serve in Norfolk 2 years, but previously there was a boon, but for the last 3 years we've stayed within the 800 range.
Yeah, and so what are some of the most common languages that are being used?
Overwhelmingly it's Spanish, around 700. But then behind that we have Tagalog. We have a high Filipino population, and then followed by French, Arabic, and Chinese. They're all around 30 to 40 students.
And our website, parents have an opportunity to go and click on Tagalog or Spanish, or I think we're going to add French to that. So yeah, that's really important.
And those are the most common, but we have about 18 different languages represented. I mean, there's languages I'd never heard of.
Really?
I mean, we have Urdu and Swahili and lots of Pidgin even dialects. So there's a lot of diversity within our ESL population.
Right. So what kind of services do we provide those students?
It is mostly instructional. There used to be a time where an ESL teacher's role was really to help them acclimate culturally and give them cultural supports and teach them English. Now, though, that initiative is twofold. Instructionally, our job is to improve their English proficiency, but we also raise those content standards as well. Now, it's almost like the content is the vehicle through which we teach them English. We really only teach them instructionally academic English. The social English they get, on the playgrounds, hopefully within their communities. And we do a little of that, but really our goal is to make sure they understand the language of, the academic language of math, the language of science.
Right.
So we're teaching them English, but it's content-based.
I got you. How many ESL teachers do we have, and do they travel from school to school to provide these services?
We have, for about our 1,000 ESL students, we have 17 ESL teachers. And it really depends on the level. We have Because if you look at our ESL student population, we have about 200 that are in high school, about 200 that are in middle school, and then around 500-600 that are in elementary school. So we're fortunate that at Norview High School we have a newcomer program. So we have a large population of newly arrived secondary students there, and in that case we have 2 or 3 full-time ESL teachers, and they get to stay. They're there in the building teaching full-on ESL courses. For the middle and elementary school, there's a lot more traveling involved because the population is just more dispersed. I mean, we have 30 elementary schools where we have ESL students, and so so it's a broader base. And we're looking at other models, but right now we may have actually we have around 80 ESL students at Ocean Air, but we only have 2 at Chesterfield Academy. And so we have a full-time teacher at Ocean Air, but then the smaller population schools we have teachers.
So it's
that
based on the
rotate.
population at the schools as to the time frame that they'll be there.
It is.
Oh wow. So for SOL testing, how is that different for ESL students?
Not dramatically. Really, there's guidance from the state that applies just to ESL students in testing. And first there's some modifications and accommodations that those students can get. Things like the use of a dictionary, but a specific kind of dictionary that's just word to word that helps them with their language. They can use an English dictionary if they meet certain criteria, and some of it depends on the test. For example, for a student that is very newly arrived, that's only been in U.S. schools for less than a year, they're exempt. They don't have to take the reading test in like 3rd grade. All these guidelines are written and they change from year to year, so don't quote me on all of them.
Because they need to provide the supports to them.
Sure. Now, after a year though, students are required to take the same SOL, or ESL students are required to take the same SOL tests as other students. The difference is something that sort of helps the school with accountability is language theory understands and has that it takes 5 to 7 years to be proficient. So they've given our students, our ESL students, 11 semesters or 5 years till they really expect the accountability piece to kick in. So the student will take the SOL, but for 11 semesters, especially we're talking elementary school students, the SOL score doesn't count against the school if they don't pass.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. How are the students performing? How does their
Well,
test
and
score
so that way, if they, but now what's nice is if they pass, the school gets that credit.
Right.
If they do not, it's called an adjustment. And so basically it's giving that the student is testing all the while. They still participate in the SOL tests with some accommodations, but their score doesn't really impact the school unless it's positive for about 5 years.
Right. Oh, well, that's good. So is it common for ESL students to participate in extracurricular activities?
We would like that to be even more so, but absolutely. Especially in the younger students have similar access, and we really encourage in high school, especially at Norview where we have a high population. They are absolutely encouraged to the best we can. I mean, sometimes there's, it's a little difficult with the language barrier, but but they have certainly the same opportunity. We'd like to see even more participation, but sports, of course, is the first appeal for a lot of them. And so so we've got some of that.
So how do you communicate and support the parents of ESL students?
Well, that's always a challenge, but as you mentioned earlier, our website has a few options. In the top right-hand corner, you see the word language, and it does a phenomenal job. It's via Google Translate, I believe, but it translates all of the content that is posted on the website, the headlines, the headers, into any, again, languages I've never even heard of. So there's a lot of options there. Now, documents within that, not so much, but there's translation like that. And I don't know if you notice, even with the most recent weather, the closings due to weather.
Yes, we were trying to do it in every language.
Yes, the announcements were, and we chose the announcements, that pop-up window was in Spanish, Tagalog, and French. And so that was exciting to see. It was easier for the parents to access. Now, if it happens within school, whether it's an enrollment or IEP meetings or discipline concerns when parents need to be contacted, we do have a translation service.
Oh, great.
Now it's called Language Line. It's over the phone, but that's just more practical and it's just more feasible than maybe hiring an interpreter that comes in, when you call them when you need it.
Right.
You can always depend on that. And so Language Line is a really reliable service, and so that helps with translation. Still, we really, that's one of our goals, is to continue to have these immigrant parents more involved. I mean, we've got the communication part down when it's necessary, but we still want to work on having more, parent meetings and more parental involvement from our immigrant, community.
Right. So what must a student do if he or she is to leave the ESL status?
Right. Well, actually, the identification of an ESL student it's pretty strict. I mean, it's very regimented, and there's a pretty strict procedure, and that is, I mentioned the home language survey. So when parents come in and enroll their kids, they notify or they indicate a language other than English on the home language survey. Mm-hmm. Whoever's enrolling, the SDS, the office manager, sends that form to us. And then we sort of pre-screen even the student. We may speak to the parents. We look at their academic record. And if there's something that indicates that English may be impacting their ability to meaningfully participate in the academic program, then we give them a test. I mean, it's an English screening, and it's common throughout the state, and that will give us an idea of how English proficient they are.
Okay.
And they will get a score from anywhere from an overall score from a 1 to a 5. So that's sort of easy to conceptualize. 1 is they don't know any English. 1 or below 1, they don't know any English. 5, they're fully proficient. And so a child is screened then, given this test, and if they score below a 5, then they're limited English proficient. They are designated officially categorized as an English learner. And
right.
Now, the only way to exit that status, and they'll have that label and status forever until we also annually assess our English learners. Every year, and we are about to start the window next week, every year students are annually assessed through the WIDA access test. Mm-hmm. And this testing is consistent throughout the state of Virginia. And actually 32 other states in the country use the same annual test. That is part of the federal accountability for English learners, is that we have to test their English every year, which is good. We have an idea of how much they're progressing. And so really they can't exit that status until they score a 5 or above on that annual English test.
So say if you're a high school student and you get a 5, can you go back to your home school? Like if you attend Norview with the ESL program and you are able to score the 5, would you be able to go back to your home school?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, anytime. Really, we could probably do a whole segment just on our newcomer program at Norview. Yeah, it's interesting. It's never mandated. I mean, we don't make a student attend Norview High School because it's not if it's not their home school. But it is a newcomer program. So the idea is it's targeted. I mean, as you can imagine, the needs of a 16-year-old that newly arrives to this country and doesn't know any English are different than a kindergartner. A kindergartner is in a language-rich environment pretty regularly, and they have more time throughout their educational career to learn English. A high school student that comes straight from Vietnam, doesn't know English at 16,
right.
They need some intense service. And so and that's why even the federal government accepts this idea of a newcomer program where we cluster students that need that intense instructional and cultural, emotional support.
And that's how we chose Norview High School. How many years has it been at that school?
This is, I guess, actually the 4th year.
4th year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We've started the 4th year, and we've made lots of adjustments. They've done phenomenal things at Norview, and actually I'm looking forward to seeing at the end of this year the graduation rate has significantly improved. I mean, we've looked at the progress that our students, the annual progress, when we assess them every year, and the growth that the high school students are making it when they're in Norview is higher than the state average.
Wonderful.
So we know that when they're getting that intense 90 minutes a day of ESL instruction, in addition to their content, they're making great gains and progress.
Great. Well, I'm glad we had you on the show today to talk about our great ESL program and what we're doing here in Norfolk Public Schools. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we want you to stay tuned for more NPS Now.
Welcome back to NPS Now. I'm Steve Sutmiller, Senior Coordinator of Athletics. Today in the studio we have a couple veterans here with us, athletic directors from Norview High School, Delton Cotton, welcome. And a familiar face, Tommy Staples, athletic director at Granby High School.
Morning.
Guys, we got you down here because we've been off for a while in athletics, and now we're kind of gearing back up. And that weather caused some issues. And we want to talk a little bit about that, and then we also want to get into some of our regional tournaments that are coming up real quick. And it's a little different, so we want our fans to know just how this is set up to benefit our team. So Delton, we'll start with you. Let's talk about, how does weather affect the sport teams when we have weather situations like we've had in the past?
Yeah, of course it's tough on everyone. It's tough on schools, it's tough on officials, it's tough on everyone when you start talking about rescheduling and redoing games. We've had an unfortunate situation where we've had to take several of our games from the last turn of our regular season and put it at the end and make some adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing, in my opinion, is practice time for the kids. They're not able to, in particular basketball, not able to stay in gyms and be able to get ready for their next game, and it's so much downtime, so it affects us very, very, very much.
So Tommy, he talks about affecting the practices, the kids. What about coaches, the athletic directors? I mean, how are they? What are the challenges? And we know rescheduling is a challenge, but what are the challenges?
Well, put it in my perspective. I know what I was doing on the snow days, just sitting home eating and just doing pretty much nothing in a sense. So you can only imagine what the athletes were doing. Coaches have a tough time because they're anxious, they want to get in the gym, they want to stay active, and what they work forward to, they take a step back. But I mean, we have that policy: no school, no practice; no school, no games. So it's in place to follow. It's one of those things that we have to follow for safety reasons. But with today's technology, you have your phone on you. You can reschedule things within 5 minutes, get in touch with everybody, group text and everything. So we're all staying in communication with each other and do that. So.
Okay. So looking at when we see that weather coming, we start to kind of prepare, and what do coaches say about when the message comes from the school system that, hey, we're closed? That means there's no practices or anything. What are the coaches saying about that? I mean, how are they dealing with that?
Well, of course they're not real happy about it because most of our coaches are very, very they like to be prepared. So it just offsets their preparation for what they're trying to do. But the one thing about it is it's not only affecting them, it's affecting their opponents and all that kind of stuff. So it's again, it's something coaches, they get pretty frustrated with us about, but we don't have any control over the weather and, whether the roads are in condition where we can get our student athletes, kids in general, to school safely. So.
Okay, so Tommy, the standard rule for the school system is what?
No school, no play.
Okay, so that's the message that's out there. So, and that's determined by the superintendent, and again, it's based on clearly safety for everybody involved. So, the weather creates a lot of situations. We get backed up, but now we're rolling. We're back in the gyms. We're back in school. Games are being played. So, where we are at this point of the year is, teams are now jockeying for positions to get into their regional tournaments. Things are different now. There's no conference, there's no district tournaments to qualify, so we really have to count on this regular season. So, Delton, we're going to start with you in basketball. Talk about regional basketball, where we are and how we determine that teams get in, and then some of the sites that we're looking at down the road.
Well, teams get in based on power points. They get 3 points for a win and really no points for a loss. So, it's in the best interest of the team that has the most wins. Our region, we're taking 8 teams to the regional playoffs. Our first round will be, the quarterfinals will end up being at the higher seeds home field, and then or basketball arena, and then the second and third round, which is the semifinals and the finals, will be at the Norfolk Scope this year, which is a venue that we're excited about. Our kids playing at a college professional atmosphere, getting an opportunity to just to see a great a great venue and a great event. So
okay, so Tommy, talk about. We have other sports. So how is track, indoor track? What's the schedule like for an athlete to advance into the regional meet and then to the state?
Track, you have cut times. You have times that are already preset to qualify. So once you hit that time at any point during the regular season or during your indoor season, then you make it to regionals. And if not, then you have a certain amount of kids you can enter per event. And that, for us, would be February 16th and 17th at Boo Williams. Well, first day would be field events, and the next day would be the running. And you know, it's same thing with swimming. Swimming's kind of the same way.
Okay, that was going to be my question for you. Continue with swimming, so that same kind of cut times.
Right, and the cut times were based on what the kids qualified for in the past with state tournaments and everything. And I think when they had to redo everything, the layout, that's what they looked at as far as what each event the time would be for each event.
Okay. All right. So the last sport is wrestling. Very difficult sport in terms of qualifying and figuring out how to qualify. So each region is doing something a little different. So at the 5A level, how are they determining wrestlers to advance on?
Well, we actually going to have actually breaking our region into two halves. And what we're going to do is we're going to have half of the teams competing at Nansemond River High School, and half of the teams competing at Green Run, and then we'll bring them all together for the finals, you know, on that Saturday. So you know, wrestling is just one of those. It's a tough sport, you know, and with the weather, you know, we're talking about the weather. You know, our kids have had a challenge. It's been a challenge of them making weight and different things like that. You know, the VHSL has allowed extra additional pounds for teams to be able, for kids to be able to make their weights and all the different things without doing anything that's going to be, you know, a hazard to their health. So, you know, again, we're excited about it. You know, again, in particular in Norfolk, I mean, I think we got several pretty good wrestlers, and you know, wrestling is one of those things, it's an individual sport. You know, with the team concept also in hand. But so I'm excited about our young kids.
Okay, so 5A, you're kind of reverting back to the old way the conference did it, taking those top four and then kind of marrying it together to get into that, having one more big final regional event, and then to get to the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I know Tommy's excited about the 6A format. So it's a little confusing at that level. So
it's confusing. We're doing an all-in concept. It'll be at Kellum High School, and the seating is what's going to be difficult. The seating is going to be difficult. I think we have some kind of criteria where it's going to be based on your record, and then they're going to do how you performed last year. Certain state qualifiers will get bonus points. So there's some kind of bonus point system in place to help those, because what's happened in the past is wrestling coaches have manipulated the whole weigh-in situation to put themselves in a better position come bracket time. So we got to watch that and make sure that everybody is doing everything they're supposed to.
yeah.
Being
So
fair.
again, it sounds like a lot of challenges, but you know, the opportunity is going to be there for some athletes to advance. So one area that we didn't touch on, and I'll kind of fill everybody in, is 3A and 4A. 3A, there's an 11-team region, and they have an all-in concept for all their sports. And again, that region is really the region that is kind of spread out through the state. The 804, the 757, a little different format for those schools. And then the 4A, again, they have some differences, but the nice thing about 4A is everything is local, 757. And we have obviously Lake Taylor that's advancing through at the basketball level, where they'll be able to have they'll host their games at Lake Taylor, since they'll be the highest seed right now. So a lot of good things coming up. Again, guys, you know, we appreciate you coming down here. You're always willing to share what's going on in athletics, and we appreciate that. All right.
Thank you.
Time.
More NPS Now after this.
We want to thank you for watching NPS Now. It airs weekly on WNPS Channel 47, or you can view us online at www.npsk12.com. If you have any great story ideas or information you'd like to share, email us at nps_news@npsk12.com. Again, we want to thank you for watching NPS Now.